Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We begin in the name of God, the most beneficent, the most merciful. Thank you all for tuning in and being on the program. My name is Syed. I'm the board chair of the Islamic Shura Council of Southern California. I'd like to welcome you all to our special feature presentation on a subject that hits at home and the heart of myself and all Muslims across the world, namely the injustices and uncalled for treatment of minorities in India, including the unique focus of our discussion, the Muslims in India, or Indian Muslims. As a person who was born in India, who spent time there, stayed for several times, visited, and still has families and ties in the country, I can only begin to get a glimpse of the danger, divisiveness, and utter disregard for human dignity that's being meted out against all aspects of life for Indian Muslims. This is through methods of segregation, violence, and of course, misinformation. The systematic hate in speech, in laws, and in societal practice and portrayals are red flags for anyone that thinks fairly and truthfully. The Quran and the words of God obligates us to stand for the cause of justice and be witnesses unto the truth. In Surah An-Nisa, verse 135, Allah lets us know that what we should stand for in the way of peace has also some barriers, and this is exactly what we see coming as roadblocks to justice and peace, namely the desire, distortion, and denial are three signs that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran. Again, that's people's hawa, the distortion or detraction that people do, namely deflection, and then completely saying and rejecting and saying there's nothing wrong, this denial. So these aspects are covered in a divine wisdom that are leading to becoming the objects of roadblocks in the path of this peace. You'll hear from our distinguished guests upon each of these aspects in much more detail. You will understand not only history of Muslims in India, you'll understand the impact of extremist ideology, how this is built up, including the most recent Islamophobic sensationalism, and perhaps more relevantly understand what our role as Muslim Americans can be in terms of action and advocacy. I'll introduce the speakers that are joining us. Our esteemed guests have many accolades, mashallah. I'm just highlighting a few of their many accomplishments. May Allah reward them and bless them and protect them and their families. Ambassador Islam Siddiqui is the president of the American Muslim Institution, former U.S. Undersecretary of Agriculture, senior advisor at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and he will be addressing us to begin the discussion on the impact of extremist movements in India. Ambassador Siddiqui.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I thank the Shura Council in California and especially Dr. Syed Azim for scheduling and organizing this Indian Muslim awareness event this afternoon. I think Dr. Azim said it very well, and I want to just expand on this. After the blood-curdling call for the ethnic cleansing of 2 million Muslims came last month by the Hindu extremists who were meeting in Haridwar at the Hindu Religion Parliament or Hindu Dharma Sansad, it became clear that more than 200 million Muslims in India are facing existential threat in India. Muslims around the world and the international community must know this fascist ideology that has taken over the land of Mahatma Gandhi. Not only the Muslims and Christians at this time are in danger, but the future of democracy and India's national unity is in question if this hateful RSS ideology of Hindutva is not exposed. Therefore, we must internationalize this issue and must act now and not later, because it will be too late once mass-scale violence is spread like a wildfire in India. And you remember the partition of India in 1947. That's the last time we saw an example how things can get out of hand quite quickly. It's sad to watch every day what Dr. Azim said. Innocent Muslims and Christians are being demonized, harassed, lynched, and even killed. And also their places of worship are being burned, demolished in the world's largest democracy. Prime Minister India during all this and Home Minister Amit Shah, who is responsible for the internal security of India, have been silent on this serious threat to India's internal peace and security. Had it been the other way around, I don't think they would have been that quiet. It is more deplorable that the chief organizer of the Hindu religion parliament, Swami Narsinha, and other priests who spoke at this conclave in Haridwar for cleansing of Muslims, in terms of they have not been charged for this spreading the hate and violence. For 2 weeks, they were free. On only after this, only two of them were charged, and Yati Nasirunan has been released recently. Again, it shows the failure of law and order. The other way around, some Muslim clerics had made even 1,000th of that statement of spreading violence and disunity. Indian government will put them in the jails right away. And this has been done and is being done. History teaches us that the failure of international community to act in the face of fascism, demonization, and horrific acts of violence directed against the Jews in the 1930s and early 1940s in Germany got worse and led to the worst Holocaust. About 6 million Jews were perished in Europe. Unless the Indian government is put on notice by the Muslim countries and the international community, the situation for Muslims, Christians, and Sikh minorities in India is only going to get worse. Especially if the BJP government in Uttar Pradesh under Yogi Adityanath is re-elected next month, and 2 years later, Modi government is returned to power in the Indian Parliament after the elections in 2024. So, with that brief overview of the situation which is happening now and could get worse, let's talk about the impact of extremist movements in India. We have been very lucky since India's independence in 1947. After what we saw, the bloodshed and partitions, things have been better. Only trouble spots in India have been Kashmir, Indian occupied Kashmir. Also, we also saw violence in Punjab, where Khalistan movement was spreading, and occasional hot spots where riots have happened. And the worst one took place in 2002 when Modi was chief minister of Gujarat, where more than 1,200 Muslims perished at the hands of Hindu extremists. According to Indian government, there are 76 groups that are listed as extremists or terrorists, and all of them have been banned at this time. These groups are either active and were active in the past, right now hiding underground, mainly in the state of Jammu and Kashmir, as well as Punjab and Jharkhand and northeastern states like Tripura, Manipur, Nagaland, and most notable of those have been two groups. About 17 groups, which are Kashmiri Muslim groups, which are listed on this list of 76 extremist groups and terrorists, and they are demanding Kashmir's independence or self-governance. Then you have Khalistan Liberation Front and three other groups, Sikh groups, which are demanding the creation of Khalistan in Punjab. Again, this group is in hiding, but it continues to do some hit-and-run attacks. With the excessive use of force and thousands of extrajudicial killings in Kashmir and Punjab, Indian government has actually not eliminated, but just pushed these groups into hiding, where they still carry out hide-and-seek attacks on Indian paramilitary forces and the military, both in Kashmir and occasionally other parts of the country. Other 55 groups, these extremist groups, which are mostly Naxalites and Maoists in northeastern India, where some of these states like Assam, Tripura, and others, Manipur, they continue to experience violence against the Indian forces because they view them as destroying their ancestral audience, and they are demanding, these groups are demanding that their way of life be preserved and exploitation of their ancestral lands be saved. This is very similar to what Indian Americans, American Indians went through in the 16th and 17th in the US when the people from Europe colonized America. You'll be surprised to know that out of the 200 plus million Muslim population in India, only 5% of Muslims live in Kashmir and Jammu. More than 95% live peacefully, and I want to underline the word peacefully in rest of India. There are only two Muslim groups which are listed by Indian government as terrorists are Student Islamic Movement or of India or SIMI and the Anjuman. So what I'm trying to say is, I think the history of Muslim in the rest of India, there is no insurgency going on. People are living peacefully, but they are being terrorized and demonized at the hands of these RSS bands, which continue to maraud in especially northern India. The most striking omission, if you did not notice until now, from this list of terrorists is it does not list Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh or RSS. The same RSS which has been banned by the government of India right after the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi by a RSS member in 1948. Again, the same RSS was banned during the Indira Gandhi emergency in 1977, 75 and 77 rather, and also after the demo Babri Mosque by the Hindu extremists in 1992. But unfortunately, since the BJP government majority was gained in the Indian Parliament and Narendra Modi became Prime Minister in 2014, four Hindu extremist groups, namely RSS, Hindu Mahasabha, Bajrang Dal, and Hindu Vishwa Parishad, and collectively we can call for the sake of this discussion the Sangh family or Sangh Parivar as they are known, have had a free rein in demonizing, attacking, lynching, and even killing Muslims and vandalizing our places of worship in various places in India, while the Indian police and the law enforcement officials looked the other way. Since the BJP gained absolute majority and was returned to power in 2019, of these attacks against Muslims and also against Christians and their places of worship has increased tremendously. After 8 years of BJP rule under Narendra Modi, it has become clear that there is a symbiotic relationship between BJP and the Sangh Parivar. And what that means, the BJP needs hundreds of thousands of Sangh Parivar volunteers as foot soldiers to help them at election time, as they are doing right now in Uttar Pradesh. And the Sangh Parivar needs BJP and Modi to help them in realizing RSS nearly 100-year-old dream of imposing Hindutva Raj on all over India by turning India into Hindu Rashtra or Hindu nation. Let's consider what are the impacts of violence if these groups are allowed to continue, especially the RSS and the Sangh Parivar, their crimes in destroying India's unity and peace. Number one, there's no doubt that polarization which exists in India, violence by extremist group by the Sangh Parivar can pose a serious threat to national security and national unity of India. I'm not sure, just for reference purposes, that many of you listening to me this afternoon remember a country called Yugoslavia. It was a country until 1990. It is no more a country because of the ethno-nationalist wars in the Balkans, which took place in the 80s and 90s. And Yugoslavia disintegrated into 5 smaller countries like Serbia, Macedonia, Croatia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Montenegro in the early 1990s. So what I'm trying to tell you, that whole India was always ruled by Rajas, Maharajas, Nawabs, and royal families until the Mughals had partial success in bringing India into one empire. Then came the Britishers, who provided a little bit more unity, but still India continued to be ruled by Maharajas and Rajas who were fighting each other. So since 1947 until now, this is the only time India has been a united country and essentially has held together under a constitution which respects the religious freedom and human rights and freedom of expression for all of the people, just like the American Constitution in the US. So in my view, I think India's national unity and integrity will be affected, and it depends how bad the crisis goes. Number two, it will also affect India's image as the world's largest democracy. We all know that the Indian government, and especially Mr. Modi, is very sensitive to how India are perceived internationally. And I'll just give you an example. During the farmers' protests just last year, when the singers like Rihanna and also environmental activist Greta Thunberg tweeted support of farmers' protest, there was a strong reaction and pushback from the Indian government. Same thing they're doing right now. Just on January 26th, Vice President Hamid Ansari spoke at a virtual event like this one. And guess what? He was very cautious in expressing his concern about the integrity and national unity of India today and the diminution of democracy and democratic institutions. Guess what? Indian government and their spokesmen are going after Mr. Ansari for treason and all the things they can say about the former Vice President of India. And he's even saying he has been ungrateful for being given the chance to serve as India's Vice President under previous rule. Number three, it would also hurt India's economy as foreign investors and businesses who preferred the rule of law and stability to protect their investments. I'll give you another example to this point, make a point. You remember in Burma or Myanmar, after the Rohingya crisis, genocide, and the collapse of the institutions, and now the military takeover last year, the economy is collapsing and the foreign investment is going down. So these are some of the examples. Also, I can point India is #1 in foreign remittances it received from all over the world. Last year, it was the largest country which received the largest remittance, totaling $87 billion in 1 year, in 2021. And about 42% of all this people who work, Indians overseas, are working right now in Muslim countries, mostly in Middle East and Southeast Asian countries, in Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore. And these people from these Muslim countries and 3 Asian countries send about 37 billion, which is 58% of the total remittances which come to India. I believe that it will also affect the remittances which are coming into India if the situation were to get out of hand. And number 4, if the situation gets worse, in reaction to the images of violence coming out of India and several millions of, I think this violence is going to spread into Bangladesh, Pakistan, and it will not be limited. And I will not be surprised if the Hindu nationals working in Middle Eastern countries could face hardships and retaliation. And I think I make these points not for our audience this afternoon, but mostly Hindu audiences and in other Indian audiences, because what happens in India will not stay right within the borders of India in this 21st century globalized world which has internet connection, that you can watch the events happening in India as they occur simultaneously in thousands of miles away. And finally, and number 5, God forbid, if the threat of ethnic cleansing by the Sangh Parivar goes into full-scale genocide, and I hope not, and pray not that it happens, India could face international trade sanctions, and Narendra Modi and his key government officials could even be tried for crimes against humanity. So in closing, my request to all of you is to act now and prevent the bad scenarios from happening, which I've discussed in the last few minutes. Our community is known for charitable giving, but only after the victims have suffered in previous international disasters, and these kind of refugee camps still are visible, like in Palestine, after 3 generations. So what I'm trying to say is, let's think of just what could happen if 200 million Muslims in India are displaced or placed in detention camps, some of this which have already been built in the state of Assam, or are being turned into second-class citizens without rights in India. That's what RSS wants. My plea to all Indian diaspora organizations, especially Muslim organizations in the US, is to join hands and come up with a national strategy and action plan to expose the threat of Hindu extremism to our elected officials in the US, media, and opinion leaders. because these interfaith communities, whether it be Christian, Jewish, and other faiths, they will be our best allies. And this is what happened during if you remember, the civil rights movement when Martin Luther King was trying to bring equality in the U.S. and civil laws was changed. That was only possible when the majority community and many of the liberal and especially religious communities joined hands and supported Reverend Martin Luther King in his struggle to achieve equal rights for the African Americans in America. So I think we have to work with the international community. We have to work with our elected officials as well as faith leaders and opinion leaders to exposing the Hindutva's hateful and violent ideology, which has no place in the 21st century globalized world. So finally, we must keep preserve at all costs, India's secular and inclusive democracy as envisioned in India's constitution under the leadership and guidance of Mahatma Gandhi, Pandit Nehru, Maulana Azad, and Dr. Ambedkar. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum wa Khuda Hafiz. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Ambassador Siddiqui, for your inspiring ideas and words on how the ideologies in India have transformed the landscape and how we can draw parallels from American society and make this a learning point for us all on how to make sure that we understand our role and responsibility in mitigating and addressing what we can do to slow and stop this spread of violence and hate. Just a few acknowledgements as Ambassador Siddiqui is finishing up and we have our next speaker coming up. I will be asking all of you to participate in asking questions. This can be done via YouTube on our channel. If you haven't already subscribed to the Shura TV channel, please do so. And you also have a link here to find out more about the organization and learn what the Shura Council does, not only for causes like this that really matter to all of us that are happening abroad, but really the front lines of what we deal with on a daily basis for local and American and Southern California Muslims. We serve about 500,000, about 500,000 Muslims in the area. We are the voice and the platform where Muslims can come together, not only bring up concerns, but bring up solutions. With that said, again, I ask all of you to ask your questions on YouTube or on Facebook Live. Those questions will transfer to us. If you are able to just write them in, you will be, inshallah, addressed, and your exact questions will be, inshallah, included. With that said, if you have a chance to please check out shuracouncil.org for more information on our programs. We can offer not only next steps for this particular process. We will be forming and exactly aligning a donor and a volunteer base where we can sign up for this cause, for Indian Muslim awareness, for Indian Muslim advocacy, for the political process, for the informational and educational aspects. And so please check us out at shuracouncil.org. And we also really are indebted to one of our speakers that is not able to make it today for some personal and unforeseen urgent circumstances. Dr. Aslam Abdullah was really supposed to be an integral member of our panel, and we wish him well and pray for his well-being, inshallah. He is doing okay and joining us just as a participant, but we hope to have him as a speaker soon, inshallah. But in his place, a founding member of the same organization that Dr. Aslam Abdullah is a part of, the World Council for Muslim Interfaith Relations, WCMIR. Dr. Mohammad Ahmadullah Siddiqi is with us. We are very thankful to him for being on, especially as a person who is helping us with this program. Dr. Mohammad Ahmadullah Siddiqi is a founding member, as it was mentioned, for the World Council of Muslims for Interfaith Relations. He's a dean of Academic and Student Affairs at Northwest Suburban College, and also Professor Emeritus of Journalism and Public Relations at Western University, also in Illinois. So we request Dr. Mohammad Siddiqi to say a few words, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. On behalf of the World Council of Muslims for Interfaith Relations, WCMIR, I would like to thank Dr. Azim Syed and the Islamic Shura Council of Southern California for inviting us, the organization, to be a co-sponsor of this program and giving me this opportunity to share some of the ideas on the topic that is given to me. Some of you may be wondering what is the place of this topic in our discussion today: history and significance of Muslims in India. This is an academic topic, but I think that the topic is very well appropriate in our discussion today, because in India, this very history of Muslims and Islam in India is under threat. It's being distorted. It is being distorted through 95% of the Indian media, day and night, that has already poisoned the minds of many fellow Indians. It has been distorted in the curriculum textbooks and also in the political discourse, as well as in the narrative of Indian Muslims that is presented to the larger Indian population. For us here in North America, it's also important because the Hindutva forces in North America are trying hard to infiltrate into boards of education and somehow change the narratives in the social studies books and curriculum textbooks, about which we must be aware, and we must challenge those forces. So, coming to the topic, it's very difficult to describe the 1500 years worth of history of Muslims in India, because the history of Islam and Muslims in India starts right after the Prophet ﷺ, when the Arab Muslims, merchants basically started visiting India, especially in the India's western coast between the 7th and 9th centuries. And they were mutually treated with regard and religious tolerance by the local population. The maritime commerce of the Arabs, which also started during this time, continued to flourish with it in many Arab Muslims, and many Arab Muslims entered and settled along the western coast of India. In the 8th century, some Arab traders landed on the west coast in South India. The Muslims found the west coast favorable for their purpose. They traded in spices, ivory, and gems, among other things, and in course of time, they became leaders of India's foreign trade. The kings of the South Indian territories were deeply interested in the export trade, for they levied a tax on every sale. Consequently, the Arab traders were more influential and respected in the country sometimes than their Indian counterparts. Maulana Abul Hasan Ali Nadwi, rahimahullah, in his book Islam and the World, writes, many progressive features in the socio-cultural structure of the different Indian communities, like respect for women and their rights, can be traced to the influence exercised upon them by Islam through its practice by early merchants who visited India and made it their home in the 7th and 8th centuries. Sufis and saints from Arabia, Syria, Samarkand, Bukhara came to India in the early period of Muslims' rule in India from 1000 to 1150 AD. Sheikh Ismail of Bukhara, for example, well versed in theology and learning, and a man of polished manners came to India and settled in Lahore in about 1005 AD. Likewise, Hazrat Sheikh Abdullah, a Sufi of Yemen, came to India and preached Islam in Gujarat and Bombay area. Another Sheikh Hassan Zanjani came to India from Azerbaijan and settled in Lahore. Various Sufi orders were established in the 11th and 12th centuries. In particular, the Chishti and Suharwardi orders took root in different parts of India, and there developed extensive activities of these two orders. Moreover, other famous orders like the Qadri and Naqshbandi were also represented and functioned along the same lines. The Sufis and saints lived a very simple life, preached love, tolerance, and mutual respect among all, and became hugely popular among the local population that entered into the fold of Islam in large numbers. Contrary to the misgivings about Muhammad bin Qasim, the prominent Indian historian Mahajan Vidyadhar writes in his book Muslim Rule in India, and in quote, Muhammad bin Qasim protected Hindu temples and allowed religious freedom to all. He is also said to have retained even the Hindu officials of King Dahir's regime, whom he defeated. Moreover, the Hindus were also taken into civil and military services. Muhammad bin Qasim then called a conference of all the Brahmins in the area and addressed them as follows. In the region of Dahir, you held responsible posts, and you must be knowing all the people of the city as well as of the country all around. You must inform which of them are noteworthy and celebrated and deserve kindness and patronage at our hands, so that we may show proper favor to them and make grants to them. As I have come to entertain a good opinion of you and have full trust in your faithfulness and sincerity, I confirm you in your post. The management of all the affairs of the state and its administration I leave in your noble hands. And this right I grant also to your children and descendants. And you need fear no alteration or cancellation of the order thus issued. He instructed his officials to deal honestly between the people and the Sultan. And if distribution is required, make it with equity and fix the revenue according to the ability to pay. Be in concord among yourselves and oppose not each other, so that the country may not be distressed. In 2011, Nabu Press reproduced the book of the famous Indian historian Tara Chand. The title of the book is Influence of Islam on Indian Culture. In this book, Tara Chand writes, the Muslims made their advent in South India on the western coast as early as the 8th century, if not earlier, and in the 10th century on the eastern coast, that they soon spread over the whole coast and in a comparatively short time acquired great influence both in politics and in society. On the one side, their leaders became ministers, admirals, ambassadors, and farmers of revenue, and on the other, they made many converts, propagated their religious ideas, established mosques, and erected tombs which became centers of activities of their saints and missionaries. And then came the Mughals, who ruled India for more than 500 years, starting from the 13th century until the East India Company seized India and sent the last Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar, to Kalapani in Rangoon, Burma. Mughals united the vast Indian land and established a kingdom that encompassed territories beyond the current India. They enriched India from architecture to composite culture, and from civil amenities to a robust judicial system. And as the former Indian President, late Dr. Radhakrishnan noted, quote, philosophical and religious thoughts to culture and arts, both the Hindu and Muslim thinkers borrowed elements from one another and tried to find a synthesis between the two great traditions, Islam and Hinduism. In the 70 plus years since India's independence, Muslims have enriched India with their thoughts, talents, and contributions in every walk of life. Those who chose to remain in India after the partition trusted India's secularism and hoped that the guarantees and rights accorded to them in the Constitution will ensure that they live amicably along with the majority community and continue to making India a strong and worthy nation. The rank and files of Muslims include the first education minister of India, 3 former presidents, 2 former chief justices of Supreme Court, the architect of India's atomic and space sciences, eminent educationists, musicians, singers, many top Bollywood celebrities, politicians, judges, army jawans, and many top army leaders, philanthropists, and media personalities. So, if I have to summarize Islam and Muslims' contribution to the making of modern India, in my opinion, this can be summarized by highlighting the following 4 areas. Number 1, equality of human beings in a country divided on the basis of caste. Giving women the honor and rights they deserve, including in articulating the end of Sati Pratha. This was a tradition when a Hindu widow has to die with her husband at the time of her funeral, to be burnt alive. And by according to women the right to own property, gain education, and advance professionally. Third, development of infrastructure, including roads. For example, the Grand Trunk Road starting from Peshawar to Calcutta, stretching over a 1,500 miles of land area. Development of the timetable for the world's largest railroad network at the time by Sir Ziauddin Ahmed, and many famous dams and bridges. And fourth, development of a pluralistic culture through art, cinema, and a rich literary heritage. Last but not the least, given the current situation, one wonders where we failed as Indians. I think both Muslims and non-Muslim took many things for granted and did not make a concerted effort to nourish and keep the ethos of a multicultural, multilingual, and multi-religious India. Whereas the RSS establishes hate-based and racist agenda of a Hindu Rashtra in 1925 and worked hard and systematically came closer to achieving its objectives, the Hindus, yes, the Hindus whose silent majority still believes in the plural India, in a secular India under the current constitution, did not effectively and strategically came in the forefront to check the onslaught of RSS and its Hindutva ideology. At the same time, I have to admit that Muslims also failed to do their job to fulfill their responsibility as a khair ummat in establishing brotherly and sisterly ties with their neighbors and preaching through their character, through their words and action, the message of Islam. They did not establish also a viable media in 70 years since independence and failed to develop their strong political as well as religious leadership. Despite all that I have just said, I still hope and believe that the people of India will realize the imminent threat posed by the Hindutva forces and will come together to save the republic. As very rightly pointed out by Ambassador Islam Siddiqui Sahib, that the current forces of racism and violence and Hindutva are not going to affect only the minorities and the Muslims. The very existence of our nation is at stake. This hatred-based Hindutva ideology is not only a threat to Muslims and other minorities, but to the very existence of a strong and plural India. Since this was a historical discourse mainly, I'd like to share with you some of the references that I have used. And if anyone is interested in a detailed history of Islam and Muslims in India, I would highly recommend for the book written by Maulana Abul Hasan Ali Nadwi, Islam and the World. Many of these books may be available through Amazon or through other publishers in India. I also think that a book by Aziz Ahmad that was published from Chicago in 1969, titled An Intellectual History of Islam in India, could also be very helpful. Another book written by Dr. S.M. Yusuf, Studies in Islamic History and Culture, published from Delhi in 1986, can also be very helpful. A very recent book published by Ghazala Wahab entitled Born a Muslim, Some Truths About Islam in India, is also very helpful. I also found a book by K.S. Lal, Early Muslims in India, published in 1984 from New Delhi, very useful. Another book published by Mahajan Vidyadhar, Muslims Rule in India, that was published in 1970 from New Delhi, is also a good book. Tara Chand, an eminent historian, he wrote a book, Influence of Islam on Indian Culture. This book has been reproduced in its original form by many publishers from time to time since it was first published in early post-independent India. And recently in 2021, it was again published and it is available on Amazon. Yusuf Hussain has also written a book on glimpses of medieval Indian culture that was published from Bombay in 1962. So in conclusion, as I said in the very beginning, it's very important for us to understand the history and significance of Islam and Muslims in India, because this history spans over a period of 1500 years almost. And we should not allow the Hindutva forces to distort this history and to malign the minds of young generation of Indians to create hatred towards minority communities. I once again thank the Islamic Shura Council of Southern California and Brother Dr. Azim Syed. And once again, on behalf of the World Council of Muslims for Interfaith Relations, thank you very much. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين والحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you so much, Dr. Mohammad Ahmadullah Siddiqi, for those very, very important words on the intricate and very interesting and beautiful history of the embedded nature of the Muslim presence in India. The aspects you mentioned of equality, pluralistic approaches to peaceful coexistence are part and parcel of Indian society, and I hope and pray that situation is reversed to a point where we can coexist mutually, respectfully, and for the betterment of the people around and in the country. It's also very interesting to note that the first mosque in India was built, some say, historians point to that it was built in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, himself. So it is a long history, and we hope to have that link to the past live on, inshallah. With that, we will move to our third speaker. And just a reminder, if you do have questions, please address them in the chat in YouTube or Facebook Live. Those questions will be received and inshallah answered as a matter of priority. And please ask the questions in the chat in either forum, that is Facebook Live or YouTube. And if you haven't gotten a chance to be a part of our subscription and list of regular viewers, please subscribe to the Shura TV channel for this program and inshallah future ones of all different types. Our next speaker, Waqas Syed, is a recent board member of the Shura Council of Southern California, someone who is well known among the community here. He's also the national coordinator and board of director member of the North American Indian Muslim Association. So we'll ask Waqas to speak on the Indian Islamophobic ideology and its current implications and formulations.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much, Dr. Azim. And I appreciate our former speakers, previous speakers, our Honorable Ambassador and Dr. Ahmadullah Siddiqui, for shedding a light on the historical background of this ideology of hate, as well as the contributions of Muslims. Moving on with the same momentum, I would like to shed more light on the impact of this hateful ideology in this very country that we live in United States. And the next few minutes, I would like to take I would like to draw your attention to some of the facts and figures that may come as a surprise to us, how entrenched and how deeply rooted this ideology of hate that is creating such a havoc in India is taking place right in our neighborhoods. So inshallah, I'll begin with certain areas or certain figures and stats. Please forgive me for throwing out a lot of numbers and statistics, but it is important for us to understand the magnitude and gauge the impact that is happening in our society here. Since 2014, when the BJP government came to power in India, there have been immense pressure on establishing and normalizing the Hindutva ideology here in very normal and regular fashion. However, we see currently there are 2,000 chapters or offices of various Hindutva-related organizations all over North America. Just the RSS branch of United States and not Canada, which is the HSS, Hindu Swayam Sevak, conducts about 222 shakas every week. Shakas are gatherings where this ideology is strengthened and spread out to community members, to the Indian community who are associated with them. This impacts about 45,000 families, according to their own stats from 2019. There are over 100 Congress members whose offices have been visited by HSS. And based on our previous speakers, we have heard what is RSS, the ideology, and this is the branch, the HSS is the branch of RSS in US. These visits to the congressional offices have been coordinated by the Hindu American Foundation. They have been organizing a regular advocacy day since 2018, and the results of these we see in some of the statements by the elected officials. Their effect and effort does not stop there. It continues to the religious realm of the Hindu community. Over 100 temples participated in 2017 in the Hindu Mandir Executives Conference. It's a project of VHP of America, Vishwa Hindu Parishad of America. VHP is the religious branch of the RSS movement, and the American branch of VHP is the VHP of America. And this overshadows the pious and the Hindus who believe in plurality, who believe in coexistence, and who believe in respect for religion. And these are being overtaken by the VHP members and volunteers who espouse the hateful ideology of RSS, which is different from the religion of India. Over 800 US-based Indians had traveled to India to campaign for BJP's Narendra Modi in 2014 elections. They had put in their own funds, their time, their effort to be in the grassroots, to be right at the front in India in various centers, putting their skills, their talents at the disposal of the party. Just from 2001 to 2018, $132 million have been sent to India from these front organizations. And in a bit, I'm going to share you details of the organizations that are doing this. 25,000 US dollars to about 60,000 per month is paid at an average by the BJP-led government of India for the lobbying groups right here in United States to impact US policies, just since 2017 to 2020, in the 3 years. And they are engaging several law firms and advocacy organizations. Over $500,000 have been spent by the Oberoi Foundation to influence academic institutions of higher education and history in US in just 6 years from 2010 to 2016. Over 142,000 has been sent by the Hindu American Foundation to the Oberoi Foundation to influence the California textbook project from 2012 to 2016. Now, for those who are not aware of the California textbook project, it's to influence various historical facts as well as religious facts regarding not just Hinduism, but also Islam and Muslims in the California syllabus. It's a very strong, long-drawn effort that is still undergoing by these organizations in the state of California. Over 172,000 was spent by Hindu American Foundation sister group, the Hindu American Political Action Committee, to influence US elections from 2012 to 2020. And over 117,000 was received by the Congress member Raja Krishnamurthy's campaign from these organizations during his campaigns. Now, these numbers gives you not just an idea of the extent of uh, uh, the groups right here in United States, but also the vision, what vision they have for influencing the society and the communities that we live in. The All India Movement for Seva, which is a charitable group here in US, has transferred over $23 million. The Ikal Vidalya Foundation of America, $60 million just in 6 years. India Relief Development Fund, which includes among their recipients Vidya Bharti, Akhil Bhartiya, and Kalyan Ashram, $29 million were given to these organizations. From Shakti Peeth, another organization, $5 million. And Vishwa Hindu Parishad of America sent $3 million, all in the last 4 years. Now, these organizations the recipients are well known to the Indian community in India, in the media, who they're affiliated with. However, here in US, they are nothing but great organizations who are doing excellent social services, worthy of receiving donations, millions of dollars from everyone here, well-meaning people, including Muslim donors. So with this, you can understand how important and how critical and how urgent it is to bring about awareness in our community. The organization HSS is active among youth and families, including Vishwa Hindu Parishad of America. They do a lot of community efforts here. The Ikal Vidyalaya Foundation that I just mentioned, and the India Development and Relief Fund, and of course, Seva International, which is the overseas relief agency of RSS, have transferred millions and millions of dollars to India. The World Hindu Conference and HAF and the overseas friends of the BJP are engaged in influencing the public opinion in our country. The Hindu American Foundation, along with the Oberoi Foundation and the Hindu Education Foundation, continues their strong push to change the content of US textbooks in California, Texas, and other places. Foundation for India and Indian Diaspora Studies and HAF and other lobbying groups are engaged in changing and influencing the US domestic as well as foreign policy. The Oberoi Foundation, the Dharma Civilization Foundation, and the Infinity Foundation continue to establish chairs and fund activities to influence colleges and universities. HAF, HSS, VHP, along with their friends in India who are associated with Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, continue to spread disinformation, propaganda against minorities and against Muslims. Some of their key funding concentrations in the US, where the funds are gathered, are Hindu Heritage Endowment, the Oberoi Foundation, and the family foundations of the Oberoi family. And lastly, but not least, in the religious arena, Hindu Mandir's Executive Conference is all but overtaken by those belonging or subscribing to the RSS ideology of Hindutva. Now, I have mentioned a lot of names, a lot of numbers, but there is no other way to bring about awareness of the extent of these efforts. And I appeal to everyone in America, all well-meaning people who are concerned with the human rights situation in India to be aware of these activities. And end of the day, these activities, once the people come to know about them, are easily defeated. The hate is easily countered. And we can go back to the secular nature of the country, the constitution of India. And we can support the human rights, the rights of the minorities and Muslims in India. While being in US, there is a lot we can do. We should not get disheartened that our efforts are weak and we are not able to influence in India. However, the battle for ideological acceptance is right here in our backyard. My email is mentioned here below. And as our chairman, Dr. Azim, had mentioned in the beginning, that please reach out to Shura Council. We can connect with a lot of amazing projects that several organizations are engaged in. There are organizations in public advocacy, in research, in bringing about awareness, organizing projects that are that bring about more data in the hands of advocates, in the hands of media and journalists, and so on. There are database projects. As you know, the Indian government has completely eliminated any record of hate crimes in India. The section by the annual crime report on hate crimes has been eliminated since 2017. Few efforts, individual efforts by newspapers have been shut down. However, there are still groups who are working on that and several other areas, and we can definitely put you in touch. So I request those who are watching to get involved in this situation and support all of these organizations who are engaged in these efforts. I look forward to your questions and continued engagement. I thank Shura Council, Dr. Azim, for the opportunity to make this presentation. Jazakallahu khairan. Thank you so much.
Jazakallah khair, Waqas. Thank you for those very relevant and eye-opening estimates and figures and very groundbreaking data that is now coming out about how widespread and how widely backed this ideology and movement has now become and taken shape in the form of the American political and societal arena here. This is key figures we'll have to keep in touch. As Waqas mentioned, please, we will have a sign up soon available about how we can exactly coalesce and come together to make this cause even furthered, whether in actual steps, whether in partnership with the organizations that are doing wonderful work. Some of those have been mentioned, and even more ideas on how to exactly advance this cause. And inshallah, I think those three key elements of how we can really play a part are to focus on acknowledging the wonderful efforts that are going on, asking where we can fit in, and actually acting. So asking, acknowledging, and acting, these are positive and productive ways that we can add to these conversations and add to the building up of momentum as we try to, on the behalf of our Indian brothers and sisters, really take a stand for their safety and their security in the country of India. With that said, we will be now focusing to the most relevant and probably the practical aspects of social and political avenues of advocacy. The topic will be spoken about by Shakeel Syed, another very well-known leader among Southern California, the executive director of the South Asian Network, and a former executive director of the Islamic Shura Council of Southern California, among other positions. I ask Shakeel Bhai to please say a few words.
Jazakumullah khairan, Brother Azim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity and blessing to really get together, think through as to what can we do. to help those who are being oppressed in India. And it's a pleasure to be on this panel with the esteemed speakers before me. And my task is really easy, to remind ourselves that knowledge, understanding, awareness, education, all of these things about an issue is not fully realized if they are not put into action. So we all know what's happening in India. We all have seen this movie before in other places, particularly in Bosnia, about 20 years ago. So it's extremely important for us now really to roll our sleeves, tighten our belts, and do the best that we can. So I'm going to share a few suggestions and ideas. It's very likely that you may have already thought through, you may already have been working on this, but to the extent that I can, I'll offer these as a way of reference and a baseline that we all can participate in our individual capacity, as a family, as a community, and working across the spectrum to lift up the plight of people in India, regardless of their faith, particularly those who are of minorities in India, in the context of human rights. We learn from our deen that لَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We shall stand in solidarity with every human being, regardless of their faith and ethnicity and tradition, if they are oppressed. So we not only speak for and stand for the rights of Muslims in India, but also of other minorities, particularly Dalits, those who are quote unquote untouchables, and those who are of the Sikh background, those who are of Christian background, who are being persecuted in India. So I'll give few suggestions and ideas that we can do at different level in our community and also at the legislative level. As we are often reminded in variety of situations to reach out to our elected representatives, right? So we all are represented by one congressional rep in the House. And it's not that difficult to look him or her up as to who that person is in your district and reach out to him. I'll share with you my own story. I live in a district which is represented by a fairly committed and strong Republican who may not necessarily care much about what's happening overseas. So when I called him in his office and spoke with his staff about if they know what's happening in India, and the staffer said, yes, we do know what's happening in India. So I asked him what. So he mentioned the release of few latest movies that were released in India. He did not know what's happening in India the way you and I know. What that tells me is they're good people. It's just that they don't know. And unless and until we help them know, it's very difficult to ask them to do what we want them to do. So task number one for us is to help educate those who are in the circles of policy, those who are elected, those who serve the elected, in order to simply help them understand the extent of what's happening in India. Again, not in the context of religion, but in the context of human rights, which is extremely important. So I would urge you to first reach out to your congressional rep and then follow up with your two senators. Each state has two senators, and I would imagine that people who are watching this program are from different places. So you have at least three people to reach out to, which takes just a few minutes. Provide them analysis and news reports to simply educate without asking anything initially. In my district, I offered whole host of materials to the staff. I'm sure they didn't read everything that I provided. They may have skimmed through, they may have read some, but I continue to make myself available to them as a resource. Over a period of time, this particular congressman who represents me, his chief of staff said, I did not know the extent of persecution of people in India, who is our close partner, who is the biggest democracy, and so on and so forth. And this representative happens to be sitting on the Human Rights Caucus in the Republican Party. And that conversation now finally happened with the chief of staff of this congressman in DC. And the local field rep in California provided the information that I provided to him. As a consequence now, this gentleman has not made any statement yet, but is much closer to than where he was 6 months ago, approximately. And this is only to illustrate that it takes time, it takes effort, and it takes persistence on our part to be doing what we need to do. We know that we need to do this. It's just a matter of commitment. So I would urge us to do that. Now, once you do this, you will realize it's not that difficult, actually. A phone call takes a few minutes, or an email takes a few minutes to put together and reach out. You may not get an answer in the first time. You call 2-3 times, and you will get an answer eventually. This particular year, 2022, is an election year, which simply means that elected officials need you more than you need them. So your asks from them would be responded in a more effective way than otherwise. So please take time to make the most of this year. Now, once you do the congressional rep, your House and two in the Senate, see if you can possibly also step up and do a little bit more. There is a committee in Senate, Foreign Relations Committee, which plays an extremely important role in this regard, in matters that are of quote-unquote foreign countries. Ask your family and friends. There are a bunch of people. I think the Senate Foreign Relations Committee is headed by Menendez of New Jersey. There's a sizable Muslim community in New Jersey. There's a sizable Indian community in New Jersey. Reach out to them and say, see if they can follow up also along with you. Now, I don't necessarily have to be in a constituency of a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. I can be a resident of anywhere in the country, and I could pick up the phone or email and call these folks and ask, what is it that the Relations Committee is doing in vis-a-vis India and the persecution of minorities in India, right? The third group, perhaps also, is the Progressive Caucus of the Democratic Party. The Progressive Caucus of Democratic Party, incidentally, is being chaired by an Indian Hindu congressional rep, Pramila Jayapal, out of state of Washington, from the city of Seattle, or larger city of Seattle area. And secondly, the vice chair of this Progressive Caucus is a congressional rep who happens to be from Southern California. I would assume that most of the people who are watching today are from SoCal, right? Katie Cooper, who represents the larger Irvine district. I don't remember the number of the district, but generally the Irvine, South Orange County area. And this caucus includes many people who we all perhaps have heard of or know or appreciate their work. Ilhan Umar, Rashida Tlaib, Andre Carson, several from Southern California, Ted Lieu, Alan Lowenthal. So a whole bunch of people from the Democratic Party are part of this Progressive Caucus. They can play an instrumental role in lifting up the plight of minorities in India. So I think we should reach out also to this Progressive Caucus. And again, you don't necessarily have to be a constituent of any of the member of this caucus. Just out of your sheer concern, you can remind them as well. So I emphasize, though, that people who are in California should pay attention to those who are members in Southern California. Judy Chu, Jimmy Gomez, Alan Lowenthal, Brad Sherman, Maxine Waters, and a few others also. And lastly, within the Progressive Caucus also, there is a task force What is this task force for? So there are different task forces: budget committee and environment and human rights, and one particular one which is peace and security. And in this caucus, it's led by Barbara Lee, a very phenomenal uh, congresswoman from Oakland, California. And there are two, at least, Californian reps on this task force also. Ro Khanna, who happens to be from India, who represents Silicon Valley, and two is Ted Lieu, who is from the South Harbor in Southern California area. This is the job to ensure that peace and security prevails all over. So you have those 3, 4 areas, which takes few minutes really, and you don't necessarily have to do this every day. You can do this once a week, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, at the most 10 minutes. And you keep repeating this over and over. And I guarantee you, if you call 2, 3 times to the same office, talk to the same guy or gal, and leave your message, they'll get to know you in person. They'll get to know you, your name. They get to know you, why you're calling, and they would not refuse you. Now, many of us may think that this effort we put in goes to waste. I hope that most of us know that every call that is made to a congressional office is required by law to be logged in. So the person, the clerk or the receptionist who's taking your call will ask, what's your zip code, what's your first name, your last name, and then what's the purpose of your call, right? They're asking this information because they log in. The more number of people, the more number of times people call on a particular issue eventually reaches the policy staff of the congressperson. And as a consequence, they take that issue up and address that issue because they understand that there is a great deal of interest associated with that issue. So this is, I believe, very simple but legislative advocacy 101. Commitment is only time, and consistency. Those are the two things that we need to commit to. Number two, there are several other human rights organizations who have spoken, who have written, and who continue to advocate for the rights, human rights of minorities in India. We are reminded in our deen to thank those who help you. So I think if nothing else, we should just pick up the phone or drop a line of thank and gratitude to human rights organizations, whether they are Amnesty International or Human Rights Watch or International Service for Human Rights, Hindus for Human Rights, based out of US, and many others, to appreciate them, to thank them. Why is that important? Those of us who are community organizers, occasionally when someone says, thank you for what you're doing, it motivates you, it inspires you to continue to do what you're doing. So I think we owe this out of our moral obligation and also out of our support to them. Third, as some of the speakers before me already spoke about the importance of creating awareness about what's happening in India, particularly in the context of this ideology, often repeated several times during the course of last few minutes, about Hindutva. Hindutva is not Hinduism, right? So this conversation helping people of varied backgrounds to talk about India and Hindutva, particularly if possible, drawing parallels with similar ideologies such as white supremacy in United States or Zionism in the apartheid Israel, right? Equating that with what Hindutva aspires for in India, as one of the speakers said, the Hindu Rashtra, the Hindu nation, one people, one nation, can be a pluralistic country, right? So this conversation with colleagues, conversation with fellow students, in a not a judgmental way, but simply apprising and helping them understand India is a beautiful country. It's a great country, excellent constitution, and so on and so forth. But here is the current challenge that we need to help our universe of friends and family and co-workers and students know and learn. Extremely important. Those of us who were around at the time when Bosnian genocide was occurring in early 90s, not many Muslims knew what Bosnia is and how many Bosnians are Muslims and what was happening in Bosnia and so on and so. It took a great deal of effort in an organized way throughout the country in helping Muslims understand that the importance of Bosnia and work in Bosnia. Fourth is literally organizing, community organizing 101 is relationships one-on-one with family and friends. And the reason we do that is multiplier effect. If you educate me more about India, as our esteemed speakers did, it gives me much more strength now that I'm equipped with that education and information and resource, which inspires me and gives me confidence then to speak to other people, what we call the multiplier effect, right? So organizing one-on-one with family and friends. So share resources, engage them in conversations, empower them with your own organizing story that, hey, I contacted my legislative rep, I contacted my professor, I contacted my student club, I gave a presentation in my local community at the Lions Club or at the mosque or a temple or a church and so on and so forth. And I was fascinated how much people did not know. And I also realized how much I was able to help them understand what was happening in India. So your own organizing story helps people build confidence, and they would like to do more also, and provide them those resources. So educate, empower, and mobilize for a variety of public campaigns or legislative advocacy and so on and so forth. It is also important for us to stay abreast of what's happening in India in an objective, meaningful way. Many of us receive these WhatsApp messages of all kinds, which sometimes are helpful and inspiring, but other times are extremely distressing, and it takes your time away. My appeal to us is that keep yourself updated through independent media from India. There's a corporate media, just like in the United States, we have corporate networks, and then there is a small network of independent, objective, honest professionals who write and report. In India also, there are a handful, few resources that we can visit and read and learn from. The ones that I follow, and I do this on a pretty much a regular basis just to see the headlines and things that catch my attention, I read more. Wire. .in. So India domain is IN, right? Like .com or org and stuff. Wire.in. Newslaundry.com. NewsClick. Caravan Magazine, and there are several others. But they give authentic, objective, independent reporting from what's happening, unlike what you see in the major corporate news network in India, whether it's Times of India or Hindu or Indian Express and the famous papers. Now, occasionally you do get some very objective op-eds and news reports there as well. But reporting, the reason why this is important is two. One, you would know in an authentic way what's happening in India from these independent news resources. And then you can share these resources with others whom you know, but who may not know these resources, right? So again, organizing on one-on-one basis. And of course, the easiest thing, the lowest hanging fruits, which I think we all can do, many of us are active on social media platforms in different ways to different extent, but post high impact stories and analysis by preferably Indian writers. And as some of our previous speakers said, there are a great many secular Hindu influencers and opinion makers and policy advocates in India and also in US who write, who speak extensively about the dangers that are looming ahead on the horizon in India. So have those reports and those analyses shared with others on the social media, rather than one anecdotal incidence of a person of Hindutva or RSS or whatever beating a innocent Muslim on the street. I mean, not that they are unimportant; they're extremely important, and they are heartbreaking and distressing. But is that going to bring about a change? I don't know. As opposed to providing in-depth analysis of the root causes and the undercurrents that, in fact, are perpetuating these crimes and these oppressive policies by the current Indian Hindu regime government, right? So those are very important. And almost closing too is allies. Building alliances with Black and indigenous and people of color communities and secular Hindus and Hindu groups in India. Hindus for Human Rights is one. Dismantling Hindutva.org is a place where a whole host of academics got together to do this extraordinary work in exposing Hindutva in the United States and its influence and impact. Our Deen teaches us وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى, cooperate and collaborate in matters of goodness and truth, so long as the outcome is good. So our building alliances with people of other ethnicities and faith groups and those who are working for human rights is an imperative, not an option. And lastly, to the extent that we can, we also owe this to the people who are suffering, to share our blessings and resources to the extent that we can, to address the plight of our brothers and sisters in India. And indeed, all of this is something that we can do, but at the end of the day, we also raise our hands and make dua. Because it is very distressing, it is very disheartening. Also, we are reminded, "Wala tahinu wala tahzanu wa antum al-a'launa in kuntum mu'minin." Right? Don't be in despair. Don't lose hope. We are people of hope. We always remain optimistic, but we do our part. So may Allah give us the strength and persistence and wisdom to continue advocating for and giving our time and our talent, our treasure, to the best that we can at an individual level, at a familial level, and at a communal level, which is what Shura Council is trying to do today. And may Allah bless the brothers who have worked hard in organizing this event, which is simply a springboard for all of us to get educated and aware and then continue on this work. I hope some of this was helpful. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair. Really appreciate that, Shakeel Bhai. Again, very important points that were shared with us for how we can exactly make up a playbook and a step-by-step process of incorporating some of the great learnings we have been able to cover in this program. Inshallah, we will be collecting and sharing the main points and a resource that can be referred back to for additional steps and follow-up. And it can provide a general guide for what to do after this program, inshallah. With that, we do have some questions we'd like to bring up with each of our very distinguished guests, alhamdulillah. I'll just refer to each one with some of the questions. And inshallah, if anyone else has anything to add, please feel free to add, as you see fit. We are definitely counting on each and every one of you to give us your input, inshallah. Dr. Mohammad Ahmadullah Siddiqi, a question for you as somebody who has not only taught, but is someone who's well-versed and very proficient in the field of public relations and media. How do you feel about the objective coverage, whether in the US media or the Indian outlets, about the plight of the Indian Muslim situation? We do hear about organizations like the United States Commission for International Religious Freedom, United Nations High Commission, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, even NGOs like Genocide Watch, national governmental organizations, or people that really call and are whistleblowers. But how do we, filter out what is the noise with what is really meaningful? I'd like your input on that, please.
Thank you very much. This is a very good question. And as far as the media in India are concerned, a large number of media have been bought out by the Modi government, and they are termed as Godi media. So there are huge media houses like Z News and others, and hundreds of television channels and newspapers that keep on propagating hatred day and night. But still, there are many in that 5% range that still care for professionally and objectively reporting the facts, what's going on. Some of these are mainstream networks like the NDTV. NDTV covers issues well, and they are 24 hours television channel, and sometimes they focus on these issues. But then there are web-based portals like The Wire and other similar organizations that bring people who are experts in social analysis and political analysis. Like recently, Anaduti Rai was interviewed by Mr. Thapar, who himself is a prominent journalist, and she beautifully analyzed the current situation. And her point was that what's going on in India is not only detrimental to Muslims and minorities, but is going to destroy the very India that we cherish so much, that we love so much. In this country, also, you will find that major newspapers, especially from time to time, you will find good analysis in New York Times. You will find articles in Washington Post, LA Times. But for the lack of coverage, I will say that it requires our effort. Just like Brother Shakeel Syed was mentioning about how to contact your congressional representatives, congressmen and senators, etc. You need to be in touch with the media people. And the very first thing that we can do is to find out, to begin with, I will say, in every major metropolitan area now at this time, there are Muslim reporters, brothers and sisters who are working in mainstream media, and most of us are totally unaware of them. I found out, for example, in Greater Chicago area, there are 12 such male and female reporters who are on NBC TV, ABC TV, the major newspaper, Sun Times, the public broadcasting television station, the NPR, everywhere. And the community was totally unaware. So I organized a conversation with them at a community center, and it turned out that about half of them graduated from our Sunday schools, and they were very closely connected with the community, but we are not utilizing that channel. So wishing that media coverage is accurate and professional is not going to work. We have to work hard. We have to reach out, and there are ways that one can reach out to media. As a public relations educator, I always say that we have to develop a mutually beneficial relationship with media. We always think why media are not covering to us. And the reporter think what this community has for us, because there is a way that news is covered. If we don't know how to create and generate news out of the activities that are going on among us, among Muslim community, at the centers, at different functions, sometimes we do a huge protest in front of civic center, 500, 700 people attended, and hardly it is covered by local TV or newspaper, because we did not properly reach out to those media channels. And because of the shortage of time, I will not elaborate, but I can assure everyone who is listening that if you have patience, if you care to learn about some basic skills of dealing with media, you are going to be able to establish that mutually beneficial relationship. And my experience teaches me that as big a newspaper as New York Times or Los Angeles Times or USA Today, there have been positive coverages, and they came out as a result of persistent work. Even, I mean, Dr. Ahmadullah is not here, but there was a time when we corresponded with the Associated Press about their style manual. There were many terms that are used in reference to Islam and Muslims. They were misspelled and they were inaccurately defined. It took several months, almost more than a year, but finally they accepted that these terms need to be redefined. So yes, there is a way if there is a will.
Thank you so much for sharing those important viewpoints, Dr. Siddiqui. Ambassador Siddiqui, a question for you. Thank you for taking the time for answering this question. You know, there is now the constant rhetoric being passed in the policy making of the Indian political conglomerate. I mean, whether anti-conversion laws, anti-terror laws, you know, whether the Citizenship Amendment Acts, things of a different nature. As a former government official in the United States, where do you see the Muslim voice in the political process in India? Is there one, and what can be done to still have a seat at the table, so to speak, and not be drowned out by the deafening silence or the, you know, the detractors?
So, Dr. Azim, in terms of the advocacy outreach in India, is virtually none. There are some individuals or organizations working with different parties, but I think there's such a fear of the RSS the extremists that even when some of the Indian leaders, Muslim leaders, have spoken, so they have been intimidated. And India's foreign minister's house was burned in Nainital, Uttarakhand, just because he compared RSS and the current climate in India to what's happening in Afghanistan with the extremist groups in Nigeria. So what I'm trying to say is I don't think much is going to happen until after the election in UP. And I hope the good news is that BJP majority is trounced and there's a change in regime in UP, and hopefully in 2024. And the key to that is the secular-minded Indians, or majority of silent Indians who have of majority community who have not spoken, they will cast their ballots against this hateful ideology. So that's my hope. But in America, I'm hopeful, and even in Europe, in European Parliament and other government bodies, where we should continue to meet and reach them out, and both American Muslim Institution and other Muslim organizations, and so with the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, as well as with the State Department. We have not had a meeting with the White House yet, but we are trying to work on one where we can take a delegation of Indian diaspora to meet with the key advisors to President Biden in the National Security Council. I think previous speakers have spoken rightfully that reaching out to your congressmen and senators, U.S. senators and congressmen, I think that's the key to really make them aware, and also Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate and House Affairs Committee in the House of Representatives is also important.
Jazakallah khair, Ambassador Siddiqui, for those very helpful comments about how this plays out in the actual climate of government in India. Waqas, a question for you in terms of the funding. You mentioned some of the very deep and financially backed movements that are filtering through the Indian and American environments. Where do you see, for example, the Amnesty International office closing in India, Mother Teresa's Catholic Charity being affected and shut down? Is there a advertent attempt to, channel or block the support that's coming from within borders or across borders?
Thank you, Dr. Azim, for the question. On the plus side, yes, you have mentioned a couple of examples. There are plenty more examples where we can talk about how the current Indian government is making things as difficult as possible. Just the permission to receive foreign exchange or donations from overseas is now ended, completely ended. No organization except those who are related or associated with Hindutva organization can apply and get approved to receive overseas donations. Now, those Muslim and Christian and other minority religious charitable organizations who already received permission from the central government, from the RBI bank, can continue, but restrictions are being made almost on a daily basis. There are raids, there are unnecessary audits, there are demands for paperwork for them. There is regular harassment to reduce that. And the examples, like you mentioned, being shut down for very minor clerical issues is continuing at a very, very fast pace. Now, the good news is that the international community, the financial organs of the governments in Europe and America and Canada are very sensitive to these kind of violations, and our governments are open to taking action where such violations happen. So the answer is very simple, and it's awareness. As soon as our governments are aware how this system is being abused, how under the guise of social services, the Hindutva associated organizations are collecting funds, transferring funds, and able to lobby here and raise funds, we will be able to stop this. And this is not hard. This is not difficult. All it takes is awareness and being aware of the organizations and what they are doing from the different reports that are being created by people in the academia, among the different journalists, is very, very helpful for activists. And the information is there, the numbers that I have presented, the names of organizations. This is all public information. There are groups who are documenting all this. All it takes is for us to be associated with these groups or people and be aware of these facts that are being presented. I hope I was able to answer.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for walking us through some of these unseen but very real, impediments that come up in this process. Shakeel, a question for you. As you spoke on the steps that we can take for advocacy, can you walk us through, instead of awareness that leads to advocacy, what are the next steps in terms of a sequential build up to actual bills passing or legislatory statutes that are presented for approval? Where are we in this, kind of gradual, but inshallah, a sure step towards the right direction? Are we seeing anybody propose anything that we can back legitimately and tangibly?
Yeah, so the sad news is no. There isn't anything in the pipeline that I know at the legislative level, either as a bill or even as a resolution against the Hindutva and the persecution of minorities in India. So I would say that we are still in the stage of awareness and education, providing information and helping the congressional offices to help them understand the extent of oppression and human rights violations that is happening in India. And that can lead to potentially some resolution or hearing or briefing. What Brother Waqas had referred to is can be a campaign, can be a hook, so to speak, for a potential hearing or a briefing to investigate if and whether or not the IRS exempted tax exempted organizations being operated by Hindutva forces in the United States, if they are in violation of the IRS tax exempt regulations. If yes, then they need to be investigated. And if they're found to be in violation of those IRS tax exempt 501c3 laws, then they need to be held accountable. That can be a campaign unto itself. So I think as a collective for us, I do believe that we are not sufficiently organized yet, or have not organized enough yet, to be able to reach a point where at a legislative level any action is taken. So there is nothing in the pipeline, which is good and bad. Bad in the sense that it didn't happen even until now, and the good is that we do have time and space. We know where we are at, and the more advocacy, the more education and awareness we do within our capacity, within our respective districts, the chances of that happening is that much more likely. So I think lighting a candle in the darkness is the answer, essentially.
Alhamdulillah, thank you for letting us know about where this is all, inshallah, leading to or can lead to. In this last little bit of time frame that we have, I'd like to ask again, going in a particular order, the speakers to give a final concluding remark about what they would like the audience and every conscious person of any faith, not only the Muslim faith, to take away from this session, and what we can really show in terms of our collective and individual contributions towards this cause. So everyone can take a minute or two to, inshallah, sum up their final thoughts and advices for us. I'll ask Dr. Siddiqui to go first. Shakeel, Waqas, inshallah, second, and we'll conclude with Shakeel Bhai. So Dr. Ahmadullah Siddiqui, please go ahead.
For me also to learn from these learned colleagues. I think in terms of points, I will say that every one of us has to be active. If we only wish that somebody else can do our job, it's not going to happen. We should not underestimate what individually we can do. Shakeel Bhai has elaborated some points, and wherever we live, we have several members of the Congress. We have at least 2 senators. We have state legislators. We have board of education members. So we need to be active. The second point I would like to make that with regard to what can we do in the United States, I see that there are 3, 4, 5 organizations of people of Indian origin that are trying to achieve something. But there is no coordination among them. This task requires huge resources. Even if we want to influence at the level of Congress and Senate, it requires a lot of efforts, a lot of resources. If each organization approaches the issue individually and is unable to cooperate, I think that is a hurdle. The same thing is happening in India. there are large national organizations. They form alliances, but they don't really work together. At this critical juncture, if we cannot come together, then when can we come together? That's a big question that I put to all of us. And thirdly, I think we need to be active in the area of media. I did not mention while answering your question that we can do a lot on social media too. Our WhatsApp posts, Twitter posts are filled with comments that we receive. I know some friends whose only job is that as soon as they receive a video, they forward it to 100 people. But when certain organization like NEMA or any other organization appeals to us that this is an issue, a congressional briefing is going to take place, we need to create a Twitter storm. Hardly 50 to 100 people tweet. That is not a Twitter storm. A Twitter storm is at least when 1,000 people tweet on that particular issue. So where can we find those people? I mean, there are enough people. And lastly, in this country, unfortunately, we are still divided into various ethnicities. We don't act like one Muslim ummah. Why this issue is only an Indian Muslim issue? Why this another issue is only Syrian Muslim issue? When I give khutbahs, I see in the last khutbah that I gave at Downtown Islamic Center in Chicago, one brother came to me and he said, well, I'm not from India, so your khutbah was based only on what's going on in India. He said, brother, you are a Muslim, a part of the Muslim Ummah, and I'm glad that you came. I need you to support the cause because whatever is happening there will affect us. Whatever is happening to Muslims in Palestine is going to affect us. So at least here in the US, we need to think about a larger Muslim community. Unfortunately, so far, that has not taken place. So I hope that Allah will give us tawfiq and the ability to come together, to work together.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair, Dr. Siddiqui, for that. Waqas, any closing last remarks that you'd like everyone to leave with, inshallah?
Jazakallah khair. One thing I would definitely like to mention that the future, at least here in the United States, is very positive. It's very hopeful. People here are focused at the end of the day for justice, for religious freedom, for democracy in India. And that is the India we as Americans know and we respect. And that is the India that we want to save. And for that, there are very specific areas, as our previous speakers have mentioned, for us to get involved in. For organizations, I would definitely request you to join coalitions. This is a land of coalitions. Any and every issue in our society in America has always been successful with coalitions. And we have several coalitions. You can reach out to me. There's the Coalition for Democracy and Secularism in India, a coalition of all minority religions based here, Dalits, Muslims, Sikhs, Christians, Hindus. We would like you to get involved in that and take up maybe small campaigns, education campaigns like Brother Shakeel mentioned, of the extent of the Hindutva penetration here, right here in our society, and get involved in awareness, creating education among our society. Secondly, for individuals, I would like to urge you, appeal to you to get involved in organizations. There are many organizations that are doing excellent work. They have a vision, and get involved with them. They may not align with you 100%, but 80%, 90% is fine. That's how organizations will get stronger. That's how projects will be done. So I urge you to get in touch. Shura Council of Southern California has great organizations in our region here that are engaged in these programs. please reach out to us. I've shared my email. The website is there. Get in touch, and inshallah, we will connect you to amazing efforts that are underway that you will see surely in the coming days taking hold right here. So those are my two points as concluding remarks. Jazakallah khair.
وإياكم جزاkallah khair Waqas. And Shakeel, by any specific things you'd like to add for practical learnings and lessons to walk away with?
Not sure if I can add anything to what I already said, but given that this month is the History and Heritage Month of our African American Black brothers and sisters in this country, what we have learned from them. So there are many things, of course, we have learned from their history, and we stand on their shoulders, frankly, to be able to simply have this ability to speak in public space today, criticizing whoever we want and be not afraid of. Courage and consistency. It behooves of us, those who claim to be the followers of the courageous Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who spoke truth to power without any concern for the consequences. And he remained consistent in his mission, in his campaign. That's the lesson we draw. I firmly believe that the Muslims in India will protect and defend themselves and honor themselves somehow or the other, sooner or later, just as the people in Bosnia did, just as people in other places did. They don't need us, frankly, but it is our duty to be able to do what we can for them and for any oppressed people, regardless of their faith and tradition. So I remind myself of the legacy of Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz in this month and pray that we be blessed with his courage and his consistent efforts in freeing the people and giving them the dignity and honor that they richly deserved. Jazakallah khair.
وإياكم. Amazing reminders about how much we can take direct and guidance and direction from our brothers and sisters in the African American community. Thank you for those remarks. And we'd like to officially thank all the speakers for their time and for their wisdom and for sharing some thoughts on how best we can serve the cause for our brothers and sisters in India who are undergoing the adversity and the challenges they are. We'd like to conclude finally with a prayer. So I ask that you all join me, and inshallah we will be sending further information. If you look back at the recording, it will be on our Shura TV page on YouTube. You can go back and retrace any information you may have found helpful and confirm any specific contacts to reach out to, inshallah. Please let myself or the Shura Council know what we can do for you. And inshallah, we will conclude, as I mentioned, with a collective dua. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. O Allah, you are the one to whose mercy everyone flees. You are the one whom we call to remove our adversities, and the one we hope will dispel our sorrows. You have full knowledge of all you have created with encompassing compassion, mercy, and forbearance. O generous and all-knowing, O Allah, choose justice for us in all of our words and select for us peace in all of our actions and facilitate freedom in all of our affairs. O Allah, we beseech you that our transgressions be overlooked, that divine mercy be bestowed upon us, that social justice and peace and prosperity be restored through us and in spite of us, that all the wrongs that are happening be righted, that God consciousness and morality be our standard, so that the destitute may no longer be in need, the young may be nurtured, the elders honored, the ones who are suffering alleviated, those who are in difficulty given a way out, those who are sick, they are cured and healed, the natural environment destroyed is restored, and bounties of yours are poured forth abundantly onto us and around us. We implore you to be freed from aggression and oppression in our home and abroad. We request that enemies be handled justly, any harm be halted, and we entreat your mercy, which is the essence of the messenger of God, Muhammad, peace be and blessings upon him, a mercy to the worlds, May the purest of salutations be upon his family, his companions, and those who follow them. Ameen. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. We again appreciate everyone being on. Jazakumullah khairan. May Allah bless and reward each and every one of you and accept and increase us in good and pleasure of the divine. Ameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.